Football and Forward, powered by the Inside the Birds podcast, brought to you by Bet365. Whatever the moment, whatever the sport, it's never ordinary at Bet365. Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast, which you can get on all podcasting platforms, is here as we take a look at some of the needs that this team has on the defensive side of the ball, where they have a lot of turnover and change. And also, the Eagles' schedule came out yesterday. Adam was on the NFL national media call, so we'll get some quick thoughts and quirks that stand out from him as the Eagles now know where and when they will play. And for the Super Bowl champions, of course, a lot of high-profile games, but this is a very challenging slate of games for the world champs.
It might good to talk to you. So let me get to my notes from the call. I've done these for like 20 years. This might have been the longest one. It was an hour, and they had to run the scheduling people, or they probably would have gone an hour and a half. And the cool thing is they did cover some Eagle stuff. Some were not. Some were brought up by the media, and some were not, where they're just the league gave an example. So let me explain the. So I know, because I listened to your show this week, so I know you had some questions that were similar to what I had. So, first of all, the Chiefs-Eagles game in Week 2, right? I know that surprised some people. Well, here's what the league said. Let's say you put it in Week 13 or 14. Well, it would not be last year's Super Bowl would not be fresh in people's minds. If you keep it in Week 2, you obviously, in this game, this is the home opener for the Chiefs. The Chiefs are obviously going to have the stench of losing that Super Bowl, so they're going to have revenge on their mind, where Week 13, Week 14, okay, who knows where the Chiefs will be. From a competitive standpoint, they might have the division wrapped up. So I totally get that. They actually addressed that. Now, I know you and I see this in the same way, the craziness of not having back-to-back home games. Like that hasn't happened here since 2008 with the Eagles. It's just very odd. Now, my sense is, Mike, we probably would have seen some back-to-back home games in October, but they have to take the Phillies into account if they're in the playoffs. Like that's a problem. You have the Flyers starting up. The Flyers play a number of Sunday games, for decades. There's Sunday 7 p.m. games. So they want to avoid traffic problems. And every team does this, but who has issues? Like if you've got conflicts, you list this with the clubs. You send in your conflicts, and they try to accommodate the best that they can. And it's funny, Mike, and we were all kind of wondering, and I heard you say this on your show, why are the Eagles playing Washington weeks 16 and 18? Something like that?
16
late
and
in the
18.
season?
16 and 18, yeah.
16 and 18, right. And your point was a good one. Well, wait a minute. What if one of them wins the division and the other one's a wild card team? They have to go and play in Washington, or Washington plays here, so they could play them 3 out of 4 weeks. They don't look at it that way, Mike, where you and I look at it differently. They're all about getting the best possible matchups. They're not so worried about sandwiching them together. They did address that one. They didn't quite address it like the way you and I are, but they don't really care about what weeks of the year. They're more worried about rest. They call it rest inequity. They study this. They look at trends of, okay, Super Bowl teams, do they have great rest? Not enough rest. Now, here's another one for you. This one is another strange one. The Lions for all of the road games, they don't have one at 1 p.m. Eastern. That's a weird deal. New for this year, the Thanksgiving game is going to go from 12:30 to 1 p.m. Eastern. They believe that this could get as many as 10 million more viewers just by moving it a half an hour, and obviously getting the game to end closer to 5 p.m. Eastern. So they think that they're going to get more, Mike. I mean, I thought that was interesting. But they didn't address some scheduling quirks, but what they made very clear is they want the best possible matchup. And this flex scheduling, they mentioned Washington. Like not literally, but figuratively, they make bets on which teams will be the best teams in the National Football League. So that's how they get these teams scheduled on primetime television. Well, last year, no one knew how good Washington would be. So this is where flex scheduling comes in. And I forget the term that they use. For games that just look like really bad, one of the teams is struggling, they want to have the ability to move a team like Washington, who comes out of nowhere. They have the ability to put them in and put them on primetime television. That's the beauty of flex scheduling.
Yeah, that's another, keep that in mind, the flex, so the Eagles could move again to another primetime window, I guess, later on at some point in the season. But, they will not play back-to-back home games the entire year, as Adam pointed out there. But I did hear Hans Schroeder on one of the podcasts out there, and he said, look, we wanted to come in with a bang. And I did hear him talk about they wanted they wanted that Super Bowl rematch fresh in people's minds, not waiting 11 weeks into the season and say, oh, well, by the way, these two teams played because an injury could happen. That
he addressed it. Yeah, Hans Schroeder, in fact, Mike, that was the first thing I mentioned at the top here. He mentioned how having it in week 2 versus week 13, 14, or 15, there could be a number of issues. As I mentioned, both teams could have stuff clinched.
Yep.
Somebody could be hurt. And by the way, part of flex schedule is not only he actually mentioned this. I think it was Ani Bose and Hans Schroeder and Mike North. Mike North is, by the way, a Philadelphia native. He's the scheduling. The Ani Bose oversees broadcast, all their broadcast partners, and Hans has been in the league for a number of years. And what they all kind of said was, look, there's things that they can't predict, but if something happens to a team. Like, for instance, one more thing before I want to get to, and we'll get to the Eagles here. Remember what happened when they made a heavy scheduling bet on the Jets last year. They rolled snake eyes because of Aaron Rodgers got hurt twice. He had an MCL sprain, I'm told, and a hamstring strain. Well, he was awful. He struggled, and they were bad. And they had the Jets in a ton of primetime games. It didn't work out for the NFL. So what did they do? They started pulling them off and putting other teams on, like Washington and others. That's the beauty of flex scheduling.
Yep. All right. Well, there's some schedule quirks and stuff from Adam Caplan here on the Sports Bash, but they still have some roster quirks that they need to figure out. Let's start with some of the things that they need here, and one of the big ones yesterday. Andrew was on with us. His initial 53. He has Dean on the PUP list, which would mean they have to find a linebacker to replace him at least early in the season there.
Yeah, we've talked about this for like 3 months. We were expecting Nakobe Dean to be on reserve PUP. That means he has to miss the first 4 games. That's the rule. He used to actually, by the way, be 6. Now it's 4. So right now, Mike, and we'll get started with we're going to start. We'll start in the middle here with the linebacker group. Remember, they start 2 inside backers. Bond's a starter, obviously, $17 million a year. Right now, if the season starts today, it would be Jeremiah Trotter Jr. We talked about this late last season. We had heard that he had a number of practices where he looked really, really good. He's just a little smaller, not the greatest athlete in the world, but really smart, intuitive player. And behind him, it's Jahad Campbell is coming back from major shoulder surgery. We don't know, Mike, when he'll be available. They're getting through that. It's not a question will he be ready for the season. It's when will he be ready in training camp. When can he take contact on that surgically repaired shoulder? Smile Mondin, who they like, who's an undersized linebacker out of Georgia, who they really like in the 5th round. Dallas Gannon, who was an undrafted free agent last year. Land Dixon, an undrafted free agent this year. So they're a little bit light there, Mike. They could use one. So, and there's a great list of linebackers out there. If they sign a veteran, they're not going to want to spend money. You know who's out there, Mike? Who did well here for a while? Kaiser White is still inside, who's played in the scheme before.
West Virginia guy, by the way. Yes, I know. I thought Kaiser had a really good year with John Gannon here when he was here for that team that went to the Super Bowl a couple of years ago. That would be an interesting pickup if they were able to get him back here. So you look at the depth chart. You got Bourne, Trotter, Campbell, Mondin, and then Gant and Dixon, and if they can bring somebody out there, you mentioned Kaiser White. There's some other interesting names, as you said, as well. So inside linebacker in flux, especially if Dean is not ready to start the year. And then, of course, Campbell, there's no guarantee he starts the year either, but I guess, they're anticipating that he will.
Yes, I don't get the sense that there's any question that he'll be able to play early in the season. What we don't know is when can he take contact on that surgically repaired shoulder.
Yes,
That's we just don't know. And by the way, they want to cross train him at inside backer and edge. So the sooner they know, the sooner they get him on there. And then the other thing is, Mike, we warn people after the draft. He has to learn this inside position. He only played it 2 years in his football playing career, the last 2 at Alabama. What Greg Cosell told us was, though his tape was intriguing when he played inside, he wasn't super instinctive because he's new to it. Well, a scouting source that's pretty close to Jeff and I told us the same thing. He said there's just some plays he's late because he's not quite natural at it. Yeah. So the sooner he gets on the field, the better, and then the earlier they're going to know about where his learning process is. So that's a problem. The next position, Mike, is cornerback. Now, opposite Quinyon Mitchell, right now it's Adoree Jackson, Keely Ringo. And Eli Ricks, remember, Mike, last year, he ended the 23 season playing a ton. Well, the new coaching staff, Vic Fangio, Christian Parker, who's a defensive backs coach, they demoted him to third string. So right now, Mike, he's got a chance with Darius Slay moving on. Mac McWilliams, a fifth rounder out of Central Florida. He's a undersized corner who could play inside. He could play nickel or he could play outside. And Tariq Castro-Fields out of Penn State, a former 49er draft pick, and B.J. Mason, an undrafted free agent. I mean, do they have enough bodies? Yes. But the good thing is there are a bunch of veteran corners out there in the market. If by mid-August Howie Roseman, the Eagles GM, is not happy with what he sees, there'll be plenty of veteran corners out there that they could sign.
Yeah, Asante Samuel Jr. is an interesting name. He's banged up a little bit and been a little bit of a disappointment, I guess, in the league. Gilmore's a veteran if they want to go down that route. Rasul Douglas seems like he's always out there.
Rasul Douglas,
Yep, there you go. All right, go ahead.
No, I was just going to say, Mike, with Asante Samuel Jr., he has a neck issue. He's a starting quality corner. Stephon Gilmore turns 35. Rasul Douglas, former Eagle, third rounder in 2017. Fabian Moreau could run. C.J. Henderson, a former first rounder for the Jaguars. Cam Sutton, who was with the Steelers last year. And then the next position is D tackle. And let me just go through this one. It's interesting. We know who the starters are going to be. It's going to be Jalen Carter. The Eagles believe Moro Jones will be a starter. And then their starting nose tackle will be Jordan Davis. That's their three-man line. And then the depth will be Ty Robinson, the fourth rounder. Thomas Booker will back up Jordan Davis as he did last season. He played for them. They claimed off waivers from the Raiders. And Gabe Hall was an undrafted free agent last year. They brought back. So, look, they showed last year they decided not to sign a veteran. As we understood, they looked at it. They didn't like the list, so they didn't do it. There are plenty of veterans out there. This is where you go in OTAs. You see how Ty Robinson does. How does Byron Young, a former third-rounder, do, formerly of the Raiders? And you go from there. And then they'll decide from there whether they need to sign anyone.
All right, Adam. You look at the defensive tackle room. You mentioned a little reworked room with Milton Williams no longer here, who will kind of jump into that spot. You outlined that. The other spot would be where they lost Josh Sweat. Do they need – I mean, they got a bunch of these guys. They thrown the darts at Ojulari. They threw a dart at Uche. They had Huff that they gave $50+ million to last year. So do they think they're okay there?
Well, they have plenty of guys. They have too many guys, to be honest with you. So it's Nolan Smith, Jalen Sutton right now would be your starters. Azeez Ojulari figures to be the first guy off the bench. Josh Uche is trying to revive his career also in a one-year deal like Ojulari. Bryce Huff is in year two of his 3-year, $51 million deal. All the $16.75 million is fully guaranteed this season, so they're not going to cut him. They're going to just see if he could contribute. Powell Ryland, their their sixth-round pick. You know, Mike, I got some good information on him today. Why did he drop despite having 25 sacks over 2 seasons? Doesn't have long arms, not a great athlete. Not super explosive, but is a one-speed pass rusher. So the more information we get, the more we understand why he dropped. It's still surprising because he had a lot of production. So you figured he'll have a chance to make it. Jahad Campbell, we expect to play some edge this season. O'Shawn Mathis, a former draftee by the Rams, and Patrick Johnson, who's back again to play special teams with KJ Henry, who was a seventh rounder for Washington years ago. So, but they don't need anybody. They just need to see what it looks like in training camp. Now, if Uche has not regained anything, it's the last 2 seasons he didn't do much. If Ojulari gets hurt, he's been hurt almost his entire career, spent a lot of time on IR. If none of these backups do anything, then they could sign someone. But right now, they don't need to add an edge rusher.
All right, we'll see. That one's going to be in flux, I would imagine. If these guys do their job, if Bryce Huff can do what they sign him to do, then probably don't need the edge rusher. Yes. But that one remains in flux. And then, Do they need a safety? I mean, this is a very green as grass room. You got, Makuba's a rookie. You got Brown, who's got very little experience. Lewis Seen's been hurt a lot. I mean, there's not a lot of experience in this room.
No, but Blankenship's a stud. Like, he's been in great story development. He's surprised all of us, to be honest with you. He wasn't drafted, Mike, let's not forget, but he's turned out to be a really good football player. They're expecting Makuba to start opposite Reed Blankenship. That's why they took Makuba in the second round. That's a starter round. Sidney Brown right now would be the third safety. That's the way we project it to happen. Lewis Seen, by the way, who's a late first rounder for the Vikings in 2022. He hasn't played meaningful football in 3 years, but as we noted at the time, the Eagles signed him off the Bills practice squad and gave him a 2-year deal for a reason. The 25 offseason was what they wanted. They wanted to get him there and take a look at him. Let's see what happens. We don't know if he's got anything left, but he's still very young, and he's healthy. We're totally healthy. He was healthy last season with Buffalo. Andre Sam, who was an undrafted free agent out of LSU last year. McCollum this is his third year. And my guy, Maxon Hook, who's a rookie, who's an undrafted free agent this year, he's a guy who's got a real shot to be the fourth safety. By the way, out of Toledo, a school that Nick Sirianni knows very, very well.
There you go. We'll look at some of the offensive depth issues that they will have this offseason that still need to be questioned. And one big question on the offense with Adam on Tuesday's show that I have for you, Adam, that we'll talk about on Tuesday's show. There's a look at the defense and, of course, a little bit on the schedule, which came out on Wednesday night right here on the Sports Bash. Football at 4 with Adam Caplan from the Inside the Birds podcast. Thanks, Adam.
Thank you.